What's up, guys? Last time we pulled the transmission out of our 1997 Jeep Grand Cherokee ZJ, and today we're gonna put it back in. So we broke this up into two videos because it was like 40 minutes long if we did it all at once. So last week we had taking the transmission out. This week we're putting the transmission back in. So we're actually gonna pick up right where we left off. Transmission was out on the ground with the transfer case, and we'll show you that, and then we'll show you all that we did to put it back in. So I'm Joel, this is Motors and Mischief, and this is our 1997 Jeep Grand Cherokee that we're putting the transmission back in. Let's get going. All right, guys, it is the next morning. Good morning to you. We're getting ready to jump back into this thing. So just a quick recap of where we are. Transmission got back in. Sorry, we did not get a ton of footage on that. It's a pistol to get those things back in no matter what you're doing. This one's actually easier than a lot of other ones I've done. We did the Ford Ranger a little bit ago, and it was a lot of work. This one's not too bad, but it's still a fight to get that thing in there. So we got it in, go up, angle, you watch the engine and you watch the bell housing on the transmission, and you adjust the transmission until it is lined up even with the engine, because you don't want to try to put the transmission on like this or like this. That won't work. So keep an eye on the engine and adjust the transmission accordingly by lifting or lowering. Once those are together, you can slide them together. There are two pins on either side of the transmission. You can see right here. They are right there and right there. The pins are in the engine block, and the pins slide in right here. And then these are the lower bolts that come from the engine side. These are your bolts that come from the transmission side. So right now we've got these lower two in. We don't have any of these uppers in. We're going to be doing that. This is your Hall effect sensor for I believe this is the crank position sensor. Yeah, this is a crank position sensor right there. So there is a gasket that goes around that. Make sure you don't lose it. Now, when you're pulling that together, make sure that you do not put the bolts in and then use the bolts to draw the transmission in. That's a bad idea. Put the bolts in and make sure that you can thread them in by hand, because then you'll know that everything's lined up. But you want to be able to push the transmission together and put those bolts into cases. You don't want to pull it in, because if it's off a little bit, those bolts are strong enough that they'll just force it in there and it'll mess everything up. So pull everything together nice and gently. So that's where we are. We're going to get those upper bolts in the bell housing right now. We still got the back of the transmission on the jack, and that'll allow us to adjust the transmission down, tilt the engine with it, so that we can get a little bit easier room to get up there and work. Other thing I wanted to tell you guys is that we installed this with the transfer case on the transmission. We've done it both ways now. It's lots easier to get the transmission in with the transfer case off, but then it's a giant pain to get the transfer case on the transmission independently, because it sits at an angle, because it's clocked to the side so that the front drive shaft can come down and go forward. So I don't know which is easier. I think it just depends on where you want your agony. Do you want agony as you're trying to put the whole thing into the Jeep, or do you want agony as you're trying to put the transfer case on? It's up to you. Like I said, we've done it both ways. 6 of one, half of the other. They both have their pluses and minuses, so do it whichever way makes the most sense for you. The definite concern of putting the transmission and the transfer case in together is you do need 2 jacks to do that, and it is balanced a little precariously. So once you get it up inside the tunnel, the transmission can't fall off because it's inside the tunnel, but it's still dangerous, and you definitely do not want to drop transmission on yourself. So my nickel's worth of free advice there. All right, let's get to going on the transmission bolts, get that bell housing installed. Okay, guys, just want to show you here. So there, oops, no, camera's in the way of the light. Okay, there are those 2 transmission bolts we were just talking about. The lower one right there has a brace for that line right there, and the upper one has the brace for the transmission dipstick. I don't know if I can get them on camera, but the other 2 bolts on the other side, that's where all the electrical comes down over there. So you have to work around the electrical and the dipstick tube and all the rest of it. So it's kind of a pain, but that is the next step. So we'll get those 2 in, and then bell housing will be all in. All right, so something interesting I want to show you guys. We were getting ready to run the transmission cooler flush through this, and We hooked up and tried to back flush it, and absolutely nothing happens. So this is hooked up the other way now, but look, you can see that's not got a tight connection on it, but we had a tight connection on it, and we had this one clamped down going the other way. You'll just have to trust me on that. But it's that transmission cooler is completely blocked. It won't go. The fluid will not flow either direction. So that's bad. It's a brand new cooler because we put a brand new radiator in this thing less than a year ago. We have bought an aftermarket cooler, and we are going to bypass the factory cooler, which was a plan that we'd had to do anyway, but now it's definitely needs to be done. So let me show you the cooler we got. Okay, here's the transmission cooler that we got. It's a nice universal, so it gets mounted to the radiator, and then here's the cooler itself. So if we'd have known we were going to need this, I might have ordered something more high performance. But honestly, this one seems pretty good. I mean, this seems to be pretty heavy duty. The cooling fins look good. The quality on the tubes and the connections and stuff all look real good. So I think this will work just great. So Sam will work on installing that while I continue to install the transmission, and we will keep you updated on both as we go. We need to cut the factory transmission lines so that they can be adapted to run into this, and we're going to flush both those lines. Yeah, we'll keep you updated. Sam will work on that. I'm going to keep working on the transmission. This Jeep has two transmission coolers. This is an external cooler, and it also, I don't know if you can see, but this line goes from that cooler into the radiator cooler, so it's using both. We are going to go ahead and remove that cooler completely because we don't know what kind of condition it's in, and it may be the thing that's causing the problem. And then we're going to mount the new cooler, which is larger than both of those, in its spot. So when we get all done, it should be a major upgrade for the Jeep. Yeah, so here's the front. We got the header panel taken off and the bumper and lights, and now we'll go ahead and install that. We'll show you that. Okay, while I have been working underneath on the transmission, Sam has got the cooler all installed. So there, we repurposed some of the factory mounts to get that thing nicely tightened in there. We'll put the soft lines right here, which will go around this, and then they'll tie into the hard lines that are underneath the Jeep that were the factory hard lines going back to the transmission that I've got hooked in back there. So that all looks good. And best of all, we don't have to worry about any contamination from the old cooler. Although we did get this cooler out, and I did blow air through the lines, and it's not jammed. So I was thinking that I was going to fess up to you guys that I screwed up, and I did, because we didn't replace that one when we did this transmission. So there is a check valve in that cooler system, and when we were pushing back against it, it could have been the check valve that was causing the problem. However, it should have gone the other direction. So what's most likely happened is the old transmission, the one that we took out, blew up, and it threw a whole bunch of metal into our coolers. So we've probably got our brand new transmission cooler packed with pieces of transmission, and then it looks like it didn't make it into this other cooler since I was able to blow air through that one. So either way, we've got the new transmission cooler installed, and we've got the factory one that's in the radiator bypassed to get it up to the transmission shop, and then they'll flush it up there. So everything will be just great. So yeah, that's what's going on with that. So let's move on to the next step now. Take you underneath here and show you the torque converter bolts. So there they are, right there. And that's one. There's 4 of them, as you know, from taking it apart. You can kind of see them. There's another one right there. So you need to put those in and torque them down to 55 foot-pounds. And then you can put the dust shield and the starter back into place, which is what we're going to do next. Starter's in, And we even got our little bracket there to hold our hoses, which we will put up there shortly. But that's all back in, dust cover is all back in. That is all good to go. Okay, next we're going to come back over here. We're going to get this bracket installed properly, the shift linkage bracket, and then we're also going to get the actual shifter assembly installed back into that and connected back up right there. So that's next. Got the cross member into place, so you can see there, that's all in nice. And we got the transmission mount in, and you can see we got all the stuff plugged in. We're still gotta tighten this guy or install that guy properly. He's just sitting there for right now. But the bar is pretty simple because there's a slot in it on this side, so you can actually slide it in on that side on one bolt and then lift it up. And so then you put 2 bolts in right here, and then 1 more bolt on the other side. And then once you've got all 4 of those in loose, I like to go ahead and put the transmission mount bolts in to make sure everything's lined up. Then tighten these, and then tighten these, and you're good. And of course, the transmission mount itself had to go on first. So that is on, and that's everything that needs to be done there. So now what we're doing is I want to put I lost my helper. She had to go to work. But I'm going to continue. Hopefully have this thing done here very shortly. Okay, shift linkage is hooked up, and the transfer case linkage is, or the bracket's reinstalled. So that is all good. Last thing to do is to put the drive shafts in. We're going to put our rear in. We are not going to put our front in at the moment because our double cardon joint is damaged. So we're going to run this sucker as a 2-wheel drive while we're waiting for that part to arrive. So you guys can put in your front drive shaft. We're going to put the rear one in, and then this will be ready to start pouring transmission fluid into it. All right, there's the rear drive shaft in, and now we are ready to put transmission fluid into the Jeep. Okay, the shop that did the rebuild on this recommended that we put 4 to 5 quarts of fluid into it, and then fire up the Jeep, and then immediately fill the rest of the transmission fluid until it's at the mark. And then they want us to cycle the transmission by going from reverse to drive back and forth a few times. And then once that's done, then check the fluid again. And then they want us to run it at about 20% throttle in gear while it's sitting up on the jack stands, and run it through all 4 gears. Once that's done, then we bring it back to a stop, put it in park, check the fluid level one more time, then it's ready for its road tests. So that's the procedure that they've given us. We're going to follow that because there is a warranty on this transmission, but only if we do all the things that they say. So we're going to do that, and then we will take this thing out on the road test. So let's get it filled up with transmission fluids, see if she fires up. The ZJ takes ATF 4, and so we've got some good castrol here. This will be filling up with. Okay, we got 4 quarts of transmission fluid in there. We got the garage door open so that the Jeep doesn't try to asphyxiate us. And we're ready to go ahead and fire it up. So fingers crossed, I hope everything works. Sign it's not pouring transmission fluid out the bottom. That's great. All right, guys, it is the next morning. By the time we got done buttoning everything up, triple checking, tightening, adjusting, fixing little things. It was just super late, and we didn't want to try to drive it at night, just in case something happens. So we are ready to road test it. So I think we got everything in. Again, it's in two-wheel drive mode, no front drive shaft. Drive shaft sitting right there, because our double cardan joint, as you can see, is a mess, and those are on back order. So we're waiting for one of those to show up, but it'll be just fine in two-wheel drive. So go ahead and fire it up, take it for a road test. All right, now we're back in the house. Works great. Everything is good. Needs a little adjustment on the throttle kickdown cable, throttle valve cable, and it also needs a little bit of adjustment on the shift linkage. It's not exactly in the right spot. We do have a video on that. I will link it in the description. And in our case, it's got to go back to the transmission shop that built the transmission. They just want to look over everything and make sure it's all good. But that's it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this. Like if you did, it helps out the algorithm. Subscribe if you would like to. That would be awesome. And we'll see you on the next one. All right, peace. Well, yeah, I tried to, but this part's messed up right here, so I screwed the whole thing up. All right. Let's try that again. You ever try and explain something and your explanation makes it worse instead of better, and you keep trying to explain it and it keeps getting worse and worse, and then you finally just give up? All right, everybody, great show today. Really appreciate it. Nice work. Good job. All right, that's it. That's a wrap. We're out of here.